Welcome this evening. I'm glad everybody made it. It's hard to get out on an evening, I know that, especially through Atlanta traffic, so I appreciate everybody being here. This is the 7th in a series of tapes that we've made. Thank you to the talents of Aubrey Bowles and all of his wonderful equipment that he can tape the seminar series for me, so I praise God for that, and I thank him for his hard work and his being here away from his family, and y'all too. And I want to thank Chalcedon Presbyterian for letting me use the facilities and for being my endless supporter in this work as long as I've been with the church. So, my name is Kay Ness. I'm a certified neurodevelopmentalist with ICANN, which is International Christian Association of Neurodevelopmentalists. Our national website is icanndo.org, and there's a national website, and my website isn't working yet, but we're getting closer. A neurodevelopmentalist is a person that looks at developmental issues as far as how the child develops, how the brain develops, and how it functions. And from newborn until a person is matured, the brain and the whole central nervous system develops in a stepwise fashion. So most of the issues we deal with in learning development and things that do develop and things that don't develop are what we call developmental issues. So that means that the good news is we can go in and intervene and help them develop more normally if they don't develop normally. And that's not the normal way in which you look at learning problems and issues, and as far as a child having problems learning or paying attention, or with gross motor function or fine motor function, or with hearing or vision and so forth. So this is a very hopeful approach. It's quite different from the psychological approach. The psychological approach looks at the brain as a fixed brain model, that if you have this disease of ADD, or you have the learning disabilities, or if you have cerebral palsy, or you're cortically blind, you'll always be that way. But the fact is that our good Lord has designed our whole central nervous system to be very plastic and changeable, and that we have found, and all the research tells us, that if you stimulate the central nervous system in a specific way, it can compensate for problems and errors and actually improve function. And sometimes you can gain function when you didn't have it before. So the system being plastic and changeable means that if we have an individual that's having problems, whether it's a baby or an adult, and no matter what the label, from a newborn baby to a brain injured child to an adult with a stroke, that means we look at the area in which the central nervous system has been impacted and injured or has a problem, and what kind of stimulation do we need to apply to that system in order to help it function and grow and develop. So neuroplasticity is all. There's no doubt about it, the fact that the central nervous system is plastic and changeable. That's where all the research is. It's a proven fact, okay? There's no question that it exists. And you hear people talking about it, and yet when you have a child with problems and you take them in to get them tested and spend your $750 to $1,500 to get them tested, they will label that child based on certain things they're doing and tell you that this child has ADD, learning disabilities, autism, and that this is a condition they'll have all their life. How many of you have had that type of experience with getting your kids tested? We don't have any labels here yet, so oh, you do? Okay. The state of the art is that, in some school districts, up to 40% of the children are labeled as being something other than a normal learner. And so if you have all these labeled children, then you get extra money as far as special ed from federal governments and so forth. And the whole emphasis isn't to fix the kids. It's to label, identify, and get more money. So it's become a huge business. My goal, and the work of the neurodevelopmentalists, which has been going on since the 40s, so this is really nothing new. I just hadn't had the money of the rest of the LD world. My goal is to give parents information, the latest research, to help you help your own children. Okay, so I constantly research and look into things that are helping children improve function, because I know that if we have enough wisdom, we can help all children overcome their problems and reach their God-given potential. So Did everybody get some of the papers that were handed out here? This is a paper I wrote a few years ago. On the, how many of you have children that are listed as, or labeled as ADD or ADHD? Okay. You know that when you do the diagnosis of attention deficit disorder, and this is a specific topic for tonight, we have other tapes on learning disabilities, reading, math, and processing issues. So Aubrey has those available for you. But if you have a child that's distractible, to get that label, you have a checklist, right, that the parents do, the psychologist does, the teachers do. And if you have so many checks, you have it, all right? How many of you know your kids should be labeled ADD? How many of you should be labeled it? As a society, I think we're all pretty ADD compared to our forefathers. If you look at the things that normally develop good attention, listening to long sermons, listening to long speeches. Today in our world, we have flash TV, short messages all the time. We're constantly changing and flickering pictures and images and new words. We don't have activities very much that require and develop sustained attention. So how many of you are homeschooling? Are most of you homeschooling? Okay. Some of the things you can do to counter that, to help your children develop attention, there's the same things our forefathers did, is that you read to your children. And you don't read to your children just 15 minutes, you read to them for an hour straight and train them to sit and listen for sustained periods of time. And I found what I do is I evaluate children and design programs and teach the parents to work with them to help them overcome problems and accelerate learning. So when I say write a program, that's after I've evaluated a child and found certain things. And for instance, if I want to help a child develop better auditory processing, I would tell the parent to read to that child an hour a night. And I get these blank looks, you know, the deer in the headlight look, sometimes an hour a night. But I've really found that having to do that sustained listening trains the kids to have better and better attention and also process bigger and bigger pieces of information. And it's really been a very wonderful thing to watch some of the families get into this. Actually, a father trained me about this because he read to his, how many kids did he have? He had 8 children. He read to his children 2 hours every night. And so even though one of his sons was one of the most hyper kids I'd ever met, he still had tremendous auditory processing because from the time this child was very little, this 9-year-old had been trained to sit and listen. So he had developed the ability to process auditorily at a very high level. And so we can develop that in our children. It's not a matter of genetics. It's a matter of what we train our children to do, what we do with that brain, what we require them to do, and how we train them to become more and more capable. I firmly believe that IQ is a function of what you do with your children, and that we are responsible for helping our children improve their ability to function intellectually, morally, and all other ways, of course. So when you have a child that's labeled ADD or ADHD, how many of you have children you know are hyper? Okay. When you have, all right, the world seems to be divided into two camps here, is that there's a world out there that says all these kids should be on Ritalin, they have a Ritalin receptor in their brain that's not being met or something like that, and their brain chemistry's off, and that they need to be on this medication. The other camp, usually the Christians and the conservatives, say ADD is a myth, it doesn't exist, and that if you're a parent of a child that is truly hyper, you know that exists, all right? You know that it's not a myth. So you're kind of caught in the middle between the two camps of people saying, this is a disease, they're all going to have it, it's a mental disorder, and the other camp saying it's made up to sell Ritalin. But the fact is there are some children that truly are hyperactive and distractible. And what I want to do is give you the pieces to analyze what makes them distractible. And then once you find the cause, what's causing the distractibility, then we can look at what to do about it, okay? So when I'm looking at a child that is distractible, say, for instance, a child that's hyperactive. I was hoping I had a kid here to demonstrate on. Pam, you're going to have to be my kid. When I'm looking at a child that is bouncing off the walls, how many of you have a bouncer that can't hold still, has got to fiddle with things, got to jump all over, has got to slam into things? Okay. This is almost always a child that has tactility issues. They're requiring that deep pressure input. Their bodies don't feel normal. They slam into things. They don't feel pain appropriately. They might have a little bit of low muscle tone, hypermobility of joints. So I see the full spectrum from the child that just has high pain tolerance to the child that has really low muscle tone and needs a lot of intervention and mobility issues. So the child that is hyperactive, that's moving all the time, has probably two issues going on. They probably have tactility issues, and they probably have metabolic issues. That means you need to look at the diet, and you need to look at what's going on with respect to how their body is processing foods and what they're exposed to. So you need to clean up the diet, and they'll tell you what we'll look at with respect to tactility issues. When I'm looking at a child's tactility, there's different levels of tactility. The first thing I test on the child is how they respond to pain. So I'll grab their arms and smile at them and squeeze harder and harder and harder. And I'll just smile at them until, and some of the kids it never hurts. Okay, they'll look right at me and just smile right back, and I could break their arm and they just keep looking at me. Some children have very high pain tolerance. And also, I'll ask them differential, which arm am I squeezing harder? So I'll squeeze this one and not this one, and some kids can tell me and some kids can't. To a certain extent, I mean, these can be just normal walking around kids, but the fact is they don't have those deep sensation receptors that are normal. And this is not uncommon. I see it quite commonly. From autistic kids to ADD kids to ADHD kids. The kid that bounces around, that slams into everything, that climbs up in trees and does the Superman thing and scares you to death is a kid with high pain tolerance. And we need to go in and stimulate those tactile receptors and normalize it. And it can be normalized. They can develop a normal pain sensation. On your, in your handouts here, there's a tactile sequence handout, and this is exactly what I do with kids, and I teach parents to do with their children when they have tactility issues. The thing that I'm talking about is deep pressure, and that's the first activity on your sequence here. And then from the tips of the fingers to the top of the arm, to normalize that deep sensation, that pain receptors, is you just squeeze the child's fingertip all the way to the bone, to the point of response, until they actually feel it. You see them move their eyes or something like that. Now, some kids you can squeeze and break it, so don't break and don't bruise. But it's not a massage. It's a honker down and squeeze, all right, till you feel the bone. And then you go to the next point up the limb and squeeze hard to the point of response. And you follow the bone all the way up, and you follow each finger. These are also the kids that have fine motor issues. They don't feel their hands appropriately. You squeeze each, or else the fingers bend way back. They have little noodle fingers. Squeeze the finger, follow the bone all the way up the wrist here, and then squeeze the whole arm. I would do it with two hands. Squeeze the arm, release, go to the next point, squeeze, release, squeeze, release, all the way to the top of the arm. So you do the hand, arm, foot, leg, and then stop.